the self-care piece, that prioritizing self-care in your life. What's your journey been like with that?
What's interesting is that how I would have categorized self-care 20 years ago is totally different than how I look at it now. I didn't think I earned self-care a lot of times 20 years ago. But now that I'm a little older, I'm an empty nester, I realize that I do need to prioritize myself, Melissa. And I think women need to give themselves permission to put themselves first.
Yes.
And it's very cliche, but we always say we can't pour from an empty cup. But when I look at kind of my habits and some of the things that I was doing, I knew I needed to really reassess my health.
Yeah.
And one of the key things was how I was exercising. I was a cardio junkie. Spin classes all the time. Well, that worked for 20 years ago, right?
Right.
And even maybe 10 years ago. But now that I'm in menopause, that high intensity cardio doesn't really gain me anything. I was watching my body change and I felt a little out of control, quite frankly. I had to readdress how I was eating. I wasn't getting enough protein. So looking at, my carbs, when I was eating carbs based on how much activity I was doing that day, getting that 30 grams of protein every time that I sat down for a meal and getting more whole foods. So I'm not perfect. I do not claim to be perfect in the way I eat, but I'm probably about 85% clean in terms of my food. That was not the case 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and I've been very frank about my journey with alcohol, and that my alarm bells started going off during the pandemic, and being kind of tired of being tired, and now knowing how much alcohol disrupts my sleep, and the fact that, frankly, this is a very unpopular thing that I'm going to say. It's a toxin.
It is.
Yeah,
and it can be a number.
It can. And I realize that I'm way more in tune with people when I'm not drinking. And first of all, I should say this. I don't see myself as an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But during the pandemic, could I drink 3 glasses of wine easily? Absolutely. Because I wasn't working. I lost my job right before the pandemic. Whether it was a Tuesday night or a Saturday night, it didn't matter at that point. Yeah. So I became very sober curious. And I did a 21-day reset, really liked how I felt during that, then kind of got away from it, then got back to it. And I think now that I'm almost 60, I am very aware now of how I feel when I do and when I don't drink. And I didn't want this necessarily be about alcohol, but I come on a roll here. But the one thing that I will say is that I don't metabolize it the way that I used to. And so now even just one drink makes me feel like I had 3. And I don't like that feeling anymore.
Yeah.
So it's been really easy to kind of cut it out.
It's so interesting. I think that as we're looking at these things, because I have looked at a lot of these same things as well. I've had to really look at, in fact, you and I were talking today of like my acid reflux has flared up again because I stopped paying attention to the things that I need to pay attention to that don't allow flare-ups. If I know I'm going to be pushing a lot, it's been a lot of emotional type of year. It's also been a very exciting year, but there's been a lot. So that is my first clue that I need to stay on my game because I'm already going to have more stress and anxiousness come up because of those details. I didn't do that. I instead kind of let that all go. And, and my body's paying the price for that now. That wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago. I could have those habits and do that and not pay a price. I metabolized like a champ. I was like you. I was a runner. I was pushing the game. I was burning calories. But I got to for me, I started showing up my late 40s of like, hold on here. My body all of a sudden stopped metabolizing, stopped processing things the same way. I had to clean up my diet, and I had to really monitor my drinking in terms of just for my overall well-being. I do not drink more than 1 to 2 drinks a week. And I really don't usually drink more than 1, 2 drinks a month, quite honestly. And sometimes I'm just like right now I'm having this acid reflux. I've let it get beyond its toll. So it's just like, no drinking right now, and really monitoring and paying attention to the healthy greens and the fiber and the protein and the simple sugar really elimination as much as I can control, because my body is telling me all these other things. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because our bodies do change, and we have to change how we feed them, fuel them. And sometimes that means taking a look at some of our habits and seeing if they're the best for us anymore. So,
I just had an interview with someone. Actually, she was on, it was the podcast this week. So this is coming out in the spring. So that won't really matter. But we were talking about sugar, and I did not realize the American Heart Association, the limit for sugar, added sugar, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So fruit is fine, is 25 to 30 grams a day for women. I mean, that is almost, a sweetened Greek yogurt. I mean, if you think about it. So,
right. It's not much.
And back to your thing with your reflux, there's a ton of things in our diets that can cause that. And, the process of elimination can be a little arduous, but it's listening to your body and see how your body behaves with different types of foods.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And what I've learned too is if I stay on my game most of the time, I can allow myself the occasional treat. Like, it doesn't mean I can't do that thing forever, but I have to be like, okay, that was the treat, back on it. I can't just let myself go. And so the good news is I know that now. The bad news is sometimes when things get crazy, I talk about my own self-care, and then I'm like, I told you earlier, I'm like, I can't sit here and tell everybody else to do this and not do it myself. I mean, I literally moved an appointment to get to the doctor to get some things squared away that I need to get back in balance so that I could do this. But I'm so glad you brought that up about the food, but also the alcohol, because I think that's something we have to really pay attention to. And when we're having those substances, and I know so many women are like, I'm not giving up my glass of wine. I'm like, I'm not telling you to give up your glass of wine, but is it a glass of wine? And why is it, do you feel like you need it? Because are you covering up something else that needs to be addressed? Or do you simply enjoy the taste and how it enhances your meal? I mean, I think we have to look at the why. That goes for food too. I mean, so much of how I've got myself back into this situation, is I've dealt with a lot of grief, a cross-country move, helped our daughter move across the country. We're doing a lot of new things here at the Embracing Layers Network. All of these things are happening at one time. So I really let my eating go, and I was like, oh, it's okay. It's fine. I feel like eating that today. I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to let myself eat it. Well, I just got myself all out of whack, and I was treating myself every day. And it's like, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is not, I know I can't do this. It's not sustainable.
Well, and if you think about it, it's self-care from the inside out.
Yes.
Because everything that we do put in our bodies eventually shows up somewhere.
It does.
On the outside. And I am not about no, right? I'm like, have the ice cream, have the cake, but just be reasonable about it. I would never tell anyone they cannot drink alcohol. I mean, that's,
that's a personal decision, but it's just something to think about.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say this, and this is more to encourage people. since I have been paying more attention to how I eat, not just what I eat, but just how I eat, when I eat, and doing more heavy lifting of weights, doing some high intensity cardio, but not crazy. I fit into a pair of pants last Saturday night before I went out that I could not zip up a year ago.
Wow. And that's just from paying attention. And I think that's an important thing. You didn't go on a crazy fad diet or something that's not sustainable over time.
No.
You did this in a healthy, natural, sustainable lifestyle way.
Thank you for saying lifestyle, because that's what it is now. It is a lifestyle. And I know you're all about this as well. I'm training, and I'm doing air quotes. I am training for when I'm 80 years old.
Yes.
And that is so important to me, because I had a mom who had fallen in her kitchen and she could not get herself up off the floor.
Wow.
She wasn't hurt. She just did not have the strength to get herself up. And I do not want that to happen to me. So when I tell you I'm training to be 80, I am training to be 80.
I love that. That's such a good way of looking at it too. It's like, what kind of a quality of life do you want to have? How do you want that to feel? You get to decide that in a lot of different ways by the choices you make now. And it's not too late to shift. I mean, it might be too late on some things, but you can always change the narrative and improve from wherever you are too. I think that's an important thing to remember. And so if you're 75, you feel like you need to make a shift, make the shift. If you're 25 or 30, know this now and get into these good spaces now, but also know that what you can do now may not be what you can do 20, 30 years from now. And that's okay. You just got to make those shifts. But your body will tell you, your body will tell you, you will know, and you just got to decide to listen to it and start asking the questions. But thank you for that. That was so good. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. We know these things are connected. We know if we don't process emotions that they will show up in other ways in ourselves. We see it in our teams that we work with. We see it with our relationships. So talk to me about your journey with that.
There's the emotional piece. I think there's two pieces to that for me. First is walking. That is better than medicine to me, is getting out for a walk in the sunshine.
Yes.
It's just my happy place. The other thing is prayer. And, I'm not this Bible thumper or anything like that. But to me, my spiritual connection with God is very important. And I talk to him all the time.
And I love how you put that in a very relational sense, because that is a personal thing. And that opens it up to knowing you've got someone to talk to all the time about as you're sorting through things. A lot of times I walk too. I literally recorded with someone, took the time, went on a 30-minute walk, came back, showered, and now I'm recording with you, because that's such an important part of my day, getting outside, breathing in fresh air, seeing something different, changing, it's powerful me emotionally as it is physically and moving my body. But within that, I do a lot of thinking, praying, talking as I'm walking. Is that how that works for you too?
Yeah. And I think the other piece of that is it's 30 minutes. It's a 2-mile walk. We don't have to commit to an hour in the gym to do something positive for ourselves. And, that's physically and the mental beauty of getting out and walking.
Yeah.
And I will say this, kind of off the topic a little bit, is that walking isn't enough impact for us midlife gals.
Right.
We gotta
get some weight resistance.
Yeah. And get some pounding on the pavement. And, but walking and prayer, I would say, and the two go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just like finding that thing that works for you. I mean, I think that's so important too. Find that thing that works for you you'll feel that sense of relief in your body when you've found that thing that works for you. And you'll feel it, like I said, physically, emotionally, tangibly, it all goes together. But if you don't have something like that in place, that can be a problem. It'll store up over time. So strongly encourage you to find that thing. And if you don't know what that thing is, think of those things that nourish you. I mean, we'll end the podcast with this, but I always ask people at the end, those 5 things that nourish you, start there. Start with that, but find that practice that allows you to have that space. Thank you for that. So good. Confidently setting boundaries. You're a busy person. You have a full-time job outside of this, in the healthcare, in sales, you're managing people, but you also have this great podcast where you're talking about a lot of the things that you care about already from a health standpoint. You're bringing people on and talking about them, different experts in all kinds of fields, physical health, mental health, emotional health, relational health, all those things, and asking for a friend. And you rely on that. You hear things from friends and feedback from people and find those resources. And it's fantastic. Like I said, it's one of my favorite podcasts, but you've got to have some boundaries around all of this because you do some public speaking. I mean, you're doing a lot of different things. So talk to me about your boundaries journey.
Well, and I know you get this answer all the time, but you have to learn to say no.
Yeah.
And I say often too that I don't really care what other people think. So that is also a way of creating a boundary. I do a lot of this for me, for my creative outlet, for something I'm passionate about doing. And so I try not to worry about external noise. Mm-hmm. So that's also a way of setting boundaries. But if I'm tired and I don't feel like going to a party or an outing with friends, or I just say no. Yeah. And I'm okay doing that. I don't feel any longer like I'm missing out when I don't go to those things. Because
you said any longer. Is that something? So you've gotten to this over time? Has this?
Yes.
Because I think we have the gift of just age and time, of just knowing better and just not caring as much because we know it's the road to nowhere. So when was that turning point for you?
Oh, I would say probably the last 5 years or so. Okay. I didn't feel so obligated or driven to attend those things. Although I do really feel like maintaining those connections are really important. And
sure.
I don't not never go.
Yeah.
But if I really feel like my body is telling me, you know what, you need to chill, I chill.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to know that and have that comfort. Again, it goes back to that listening to your body. It will tell you and being okay with that. Yeah. So good. How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically? Talk to me about your journey with that.
I think we're doing it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought about that when you presented that question to me, because I will bring people on my podcast who probably are trying to attract the exact same audience that I am. But I know that there is enough room at the table for everyone.
Yes.
And that old saying of all boats rise in high tide. So if we do support each other and give everybody a voice, well, I have everything to gain from doing that. And so I want to feature women who have written books, have coaching businesses, have podcasts like you, Melissa. Let's get it out there. Women in midlife are doing great things. We got to talk about it and support each other.
Yes, I love that you said that, because I agree. We are doing it right now because we are dispelling the myth that only one of us can have these conversations. There cannot be enough of these conversations. we are half the population in the world. There is more than room for all of us. And so I think both you and I have been the kinds of people who we've extended invitations. Let's get together. Let's swap. Let's share ideas. Let's bring more people with us. Let's take the stigma off some of these conversations. We both have those conversations on our podcast where people get a little cringy. They hear hormones and sex and, vagina and unhealthy relationships and all those kinds of things that we've been needing to take the stigma off for years. You and I are afraid to have those conversations, but through meeting you, you're one of my favorite podcasts. I love listening to you. I get a lot of ideas from it. I love what you do. And it's encouraging. I'm not threatened by you. You're not threatened by me. We need each other to get more people engaged and involved to thinking about their care and knowing that it's not too late to thrive. Your life is not over when you turn 45, 50, 55, 60. Sometimes it's a new season in so many ways. It's just beginning. You have opportunities. You and I are both empty nesters now. We get to do things now we didn't have the time for 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so, and then also too, bringing the younger generations in, which so many of them are having those conversations already. I'm seeing my 3 daughters in their 20s that are on these things now. They're not going to have to deal with stuff, but they've learned from watching us. And they've learned there's a different, better way to do this. Glad to see mom get on it now, but I'm going to get on it. I'm not going to worry about getting to that point. I'm going to get on it now.
Well, and there's also the point that, women don't always prioritize their health, right? And so they're not asking their medical providers these questions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, the theme of my podcast is that I'm asking those questions. But I want women to feel empowered to not put up with the status quo.
Yeah.
And, ask questions. And if you're not getting those answers, then go find a provider who will help you, who will listen. Don't let people gaslight you into thinking that it's all in your head or this is just, midlife and now that's just menopause. This is just the way it is. Well, no, that's not the case. And, I was at a women's event and we had a pelvic floor specialist talking about leaky bladder. Mm-hmm. And, if you're peeing in your pants, why are you putting up with that? That's not normal. Go get help. Right.
Yeah.
And I know that women were looking at each other saying, oh, so I can actually fix that,
right?
It's all about awareness, Melissa.
It is. It's about awareness. It's about knowing that you're worth being heard, that you have a right to take up space and be heard and be dealt with, that you're not, if you feel like your doctor is making you feel like you're putting them out for asking those questions, you need a different provider. And Absolutely. That can be hard. Changing providers can be a pain. It's a process. I've just moved to a new city. I'm visiting a new provider today. I'm going to test them out. And see what I think. If they give me the help and the ear and the answers and support I'm looking for, great. If not, I will move on and find somebody that will. That you are worth doing that. But I think we're normalized and asking those questions. So many things we don't have to live with. You and I've talked about before. I did not know what perimenopause was until I was well through perimenopause. No one had that conversation with me. So we've got to ask those questions. Don't feel like you just have to live with it. I had a guest a few weeks ago who, she really focuses on just clean eating, not the good quality, tasty, good food, clean eating. But she's like, her kind of, we ended up titling the episode. This is like, menopause is normal. Suffering is not. We don't have to suffer. We don't have to suffer. It's not a required chapter that you have to go through and check off your list. It's not necessary. There's a better way to do things.
Absolutely.
The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values and what you do, those things that you are deciding what you're going to say yes and no to, where does your why and your values come into play on that?
I'm kind of getting to the point where I just really want to prioritize my family. You know, and that to me is my why I've done anything over the last, 40 years of my life. The other thing is being true to myself. And I think, if I use the podcast as an example, having that creative outlet, but being true to who I am and being myself, not being somebody that is maybe I'm not appealing to some people. Well, that's okay. Then find a podcast that you like, but I need to be who I am.
Yes. And I'm so glad you said that, because that's something I had to really get okay with too. It's like, I'm not going to be for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That doesn't mean I don't do it. There's plenty of resources out there, but don't let that stop you, because there's people you will be for and that will be receptive to that message.
Yep.
So I'm really glad you said that. So good. Living out of our own expectations versus others. Talk to me about your expectations journey and what that's been like for you.
Kind of back to that being true to myself. I believe that just doing my own thing and not what others think I should be doing. And again, this has been a process. Because 10 years ago, I probably would not have said that. I would have had probably a different answer.
Yeah.
But it's really, I want people to realize is that being in midlife is such an awesome thing. I cherish being almost 60 because it's a much better place than where I was 10 years ago. 15 years ago. I like this much better.
I agree with you. I mean, I have told people time and time again, the 50s are kind of an eye-opening decade. You're dealing with a lot of stuff. You've got the parent care going on. Your kids are, growing up, leaving, sometimes getting married. You're sometimes becoming a grandparent is mixed in there, depending on it. All those things can be a thing. Shift, you're dealing with the menopause stuff that's starting to come up. All those things are happening. But I've never felt more creative. I've never felt more comfortable in my own skin. I've never felt more passionate about what it is and so confident in that what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing ever in my life before. Like, as much as there's things that I wish that I knew when I was raising my daughters, because I think it would have been better as a parent and better for them. At the same time, I would not go back to that time for anything. Because I'm not that person anymore. And I like the person I'm becoming, and I'm continuing to become. And I think that's something you realize too, is we continue to become, we continue to learn, we continue to find ourselves and uncover those things about ourselves. And we have the time and space to do that now.
Oh, one other thing is I stick up for myself much better now and defend myself and be like, oh, no. Like I don't let myself get walked on.
Yeah.
I say what's on my mind, but I believe I'm a much better communicator in how I say it.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes with that confidence and being comfortable in your own skin. You feel I can be assertive here. I have the right to be assertive here. I have the right to take up space here. I have a right to say this about myself. And also, for me, and I say sorry a lot less. I've stopped apologizing so much because
I know we have to stop saying sorry, don't we?
We do. Women apologize for existing in the world. We will, you will walk by somebody on the street and they'll hit us with a bag and we'll be the ones saying, I'm sorry. It's just like, that's kind of an extreme example, but it's nuts. And so, I'm so glad you said that. It's just like, and And you don't have to wait till you get to our age to be here. I'm 54, so I'm right behind you. You get comfortable with that now, but if you aren't there yet, you can still get there. There's putting these practices in place of the healthy boundaries and the expectations and your why. That can inform all of that. But yeah, I think it's really like, I think that our parents' generation got to this age and they're like, more my grandparents' generation. I would say my mom did go back to work and do some things and started, but my grandparents' generation, they were, put their feet up on the rocker and it was all over, and they were going to be what they were going to be, and they weren't going to change from that. And that's where they were. And we're not there anymore. We're like, this is an opportunity to continue to be our best selves.
And I think you may want to edit this out when I say it, but, I think we're growing balls.
Yes. Yep.
I feel like I've gotten more ballsy than I've ever been in my life. And I've never been a shy person, but I'm definitely bolder.
Yeah, I am too. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. That's just accepting all those pieces, all those parts. It's like you and I were talking about earlier. We recognize we are not the same people as we were 10 or 15 years from now. There's two choices of that. We can be really like, oh man, I wish I would have been different. Or it's like, that's where I was then. According to the life I was living and the space I was in, that's where I showed up the best I could at that time. I've learned, and now I'm doing differently now. So talk to me about your layers journey within all of that.
There's some things that I've kind of figured out about myself over the years. One of them is because I am a perfectionist. I tend to procrastinate a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's that fear of starting something because you don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And maybe I have a little bit of ADHD too, which helps with the procrastination piece.
Yeah.
My children probably both have it too, so they come by it honestly. But that and a little bit of imposter syndrome. So as much as I say I don't care what other people think, there's a little piece of me that may not start things, that procrastination piece, because I may not feel like I'm qualified to do something.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I had my friend Liz Thomas, who she has Womanhood Unwrapped. I've had her on the show. She and her friends have just started their podcast last spring, and she and I were having this conversation, and she was like really kind of pushing me to promote myself in some other ways. You need to start promoting yourself as a thought leader. And I was just like, who am I to promote myself as a thought leader? I am just this woman who had these experiences, and now we're talking about it. I don't have a special PhD behind my name or anything. And she's like, you got to release that. That's not what this is about. That's not what defines. You have to let go of that idea of thought leader that you've created in your head. But I know what you mean about that. I'm on here. I'm bold. I'm honest. I'm authentic. But then when it comes to like those types of things of moving the needle and, putting myself out there in that different way, I was like, oh, I don't know about that. So I know what you mean.
Yeah, but you're to your credit though, you are doing that because you're moving on and you're creating this broader community with your podcast. And I'm kind of stuck in this weird place right now where, okay, what do I do with this now?
Yeah.
It's been a year and a half. It'll be 2 years in May. Where do I go from here? And that's where sometimes that imposter syndrome starts coming in, because I'm like, okay, what else? Where do I go with this? And so that's kind of, something that I still need to work through.
Well, and I think this is sometimes we run into those things with those next things, and you're a perfectionist too. So you're looking for me, I'm just like, just keep doing what you're doing. It's great. You're serving a great niche. I've invited you to be part of the radio show, all those things. So I'm like, I think sometimes too, we talk to other people and they've got all the answers for you, or they're like, oh, this is simple. Just keep doing that. And sometimes it can be really affirming and helpful, but you also have to like, okay, how do I get myself there? And what's keeping me from getting myself there? And kind of dispel the myths and lies around it too. That, and that's part of that layers piece. I'm like, what is getting in my way of thinking that and believing that about myself?
Right.
And also being okay when seasons come to an end. You and I aren't going to do this forever. There will be a point where it will be, and I think it'll be clear. I think we'll both know in our different times that we won't do this anymore. And that's okay too. It's okay, and I think so as midlife, when we've already had different seasons, we've had the early married season, we've had the mom season, we've had, we're in the after mom season now, all those types of things. And we've made shifts within that. But having freedom and making the shifts and making the decisions. But I think that imposter syndrome is very prevalent, especially because I get the perfectionist piece and the performing and wanting it to just be just right piece. I have a little of that in me myself. And sometimes that can really get in the way of just the freedom to just keep doing and just keep going, and just keep moving forward. But the ability to recognize that you can't deal with things you can't recognize. And so even just your ability to recognize that, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Absolutely.
In summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, talk to me about how that's affected your quality of your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others. As you've come into the space you're in now.
I had said before about being true to myself, being authentic, and I want to obviously be that way on my podcast, but it's helped me more in my personal life because I'm now having conversations with people that I think are more meaningful.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Since you started doing this?
Oh, yeah. Because I'm having such meaningful conversations on the podcast, I have a lot less tolerance for small talk or not small talk. There's places for that. Like I'm at a lot of events with my husband's work, but just that kind of inconsequential, but what are we doing how are we helping? How are we supporting? And what are we doing to move the needle on that? I don't have the patience for that, or for people that want to complain about something, but they don't want to do anything different. They want to make any shifts to improve that situation. They just want to come well, what are you doing about it? And to make it better, what choices do you have within that? I don't have the capacity, I think, for people that aren't actively learning, people that I was at a dinner with a woman a couple of weeks ago. It was part of my husband's work. So I had to be very manage myself within the situation where she's like, I'm 70 years old and I'm not changing. I am who I am. And people are just going to have to be okay with it. And I was just and I was in a corner with her. I was stuck in a corner with her. And I was just looking at my husband at the other end of the table. He's like, how was that? I'm like, awful. Don't ever take me to dinner with me. Save me with that woman again. I will not be as nice the next time. So that's for me. Yeah, I totally. That's how it's played out for me.
And then I do less telling and more asking.
Yes.
And I have a propensity though if someone says, well, I've had really bad hot flashes. Well, if you tell me that, then I'm gonna tell you what you could do and who you can go see and what I'm doing. But I am really much more aware of asking questions. Well, tell me a little bit about how you're feeling. When are you having hot flashes? What have you tried? I'm really getting better at that because of doing the podcast, honestly.
Yeah.
Just being better about that.
I like the questions piece. That's really important. My oldest daughter is very good at that. She's very intentional in her conversations about asking questions to get more information and to kind of And because also this power of story, I think I'm very passionate about. I want to know people's stories. Like, I didn't have time to get into it with that woman that was driving me crazy that night. There's a story. There's a reason behind why she's that way. There are, it's like, so why do you feel this way? How is it that you landed in that spot? It wasn't the time or place to get into that conversation, and it wasn't a conversation you wanted to have. So not everybody can have that. But yeah, the questions, and I think the curiosity piece, I'm much more curious.
Yes.
Like, I'm automatically like, because I even coming out of it, as frustrating as it was, I'm like, there's a reason in her story that she is that way. It doesn't excuse it or make it more pleasant to be around, but there's something behind that. She just didn't land here at 70 years old without any backstory to how she got there. So even with those situations, I'm able to, still see the human within it. And I think that's powerful too.
The other thing, Melissa, is being aware that sometimes that's just the best people can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are the way they are, and to expect anything different from them in terms of their behavior, maybe not practical.
Yeah.
And then maybe they absolutely are doing just the best they can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. Because, I think, because even as you and I look at who we were 10 years ago, we were doing the best we could do with whatever choices, decisions we were making, however we are more comfortable in our skin now. I can still say that about myself, and I know you can too, but that's a really good point. And that's something I think that's something we can all remember. And that goes back to the expectations piece, where we have to be careful with the expectations that not only living out of our own, but what we put on others. Because most of the time we start imposing expectations on other people, it's not going to go well because it's not our place. I mean, yes, there's the practical expectations in a relationship that we will be there for each other, that we will share the load, that not one of us will be doing all the one things all the time. Those are practical expectations. But in terms of how you would want people to show up, that, there's communication that goes within that, but then there's also got to be an acceptance at some point. There's relationships in my life where I've had to come to some point where the expectations I have for them were unreasonable. They just aren't going to get there. And maybe someday they will, but I can't expect that they will. That's not fair to them and the journey that they've chosen. And it's not fair to me either.
Right. No, I love that.
Yeah. So
perfect way to explain that.
Yeah. I think this is important and it's certainly something I need more practice in, but it's good to talk. It's just a good reminder, but I think the conversations that you and I get to have are so eye-opening and so refreshing and encouraging to not know only that it's a resource we know about now, that we get to share with other people too.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it's up to them what they do with it, but we get to provide that resource. And that's really exciting too. I love that. We're down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Oh, all right. So spending time with my daughters. Sleep.
Yep.
Sleep, and more sleep.
Yeah.
I think focusing on minimizing my anxiety. And that is probably 90% controllable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I consider that part of nourishment if I can just keep my anxiety at bay. And because I can control my environment and what I do.
Right.
And the drinking would be part of that too.
Yeah.
Making more connections in midlife. I found out one of my guests on the podcast that lives very close to me. And we didn't know that when we first connected. But making the effort for us to arrange our schedules so that we could meet for coffee one day, I probably would not have done that even 5 years ago.
Oh, I love that.
Maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So making that time to continue to make those connections, really continuing my wellness journey, because that one is, again, if I really want to nourish myself, that is just that whole inside out mentality and being good to myself. Yeah. Where am I? Is that 4?
I think so. I wasn't counting. I was just taking it all in.
Yeah. And I think just trying to minimize my distractions. And I can get a little sucked into Instagram, social media because of the podcast. And I really need, right? I need to
I know exactly what you mean.
I need to like walk away from that some days and just not even pick my phone up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
that would be my 5.
I think you and I probably both suffer from a little bit of FOMO on that. I'm like, what are we going to miss? What are we going to miss? And I had to do that. I've had to do it a few times where I've realized that I'm like, oh, my time on here. I feel it in my body. I mean, I feel it in my neck, I'm like, I need to minimize the time, but also for my mental space. There's just only so much I can take in a day. And there is nothing that's going to happen in this work I do that is life altering. Like, it's helpful, it's encouraging, but whether I answer that message today or on Monday, really, really not going to, be too much of a problem.
Answer, Melissa.
No, we are not. I mean, so even just giving ourselves permission. And I've tried to be better about that too. I try not to on Sunday afternoon. And I have to stay a little bit open on Sunday because my staff, a lot of them are working on the weekends and doing stuff on the weekends, and they're on the East Coast. And so that's just when they need feedback from me. But they know from 1:00 West Coast time on, I'm not available that day, and I'm not on the social media. And I had to really put that into my calendar because yes, that is something that is really easy. And you've been, all of a sudden you're just on there scrolling away and you're like, oh my gosh, it's an hour now.
I know. It was like, where did that time go?
Exactly.
I want that time back.
Yes.
And again, it's just really being more mindful of what am I getting out of that and walking away. And really, you just got to put the phone down, go charge it, put it in another room, and go do something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it affects your sleep too. I've had to put limits on it at night. Like at 8:00, I really try after 8:00 to not look at my phone. And I'm not perfect at it, but I'm mindful of the fact that makes a difference for me. That helps my brain shut down and affects the quality of my sleep and when I'm able to fall asleep. So,
the other thing, Melissa, is keeping your the lights dim in your house.
Yes. Yep.
My husband's like, "Why we live in a cave?" I said, "Well, it's evening, and I want to keep the lights dim because I want to start." Making sure my circadian rhythm is getting the right messages. And so staying off your phone is the same thing.
Blue light, that big part of it. And especially I think this time of year when it's getting darker sooner, you and I aren't going to bed at 5:30. And so in your house, as you kind of dim the lights throughout the evening, it does still keep that rhythm on schedule of when it's time to start slowing down. So that's a really good point. Thank you. Well, that was good. Okay. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Oh, okay. 5 words. Empowered. Mm-hmm. Satisfied. Mm-hmm. Healthy. Rested. Calm.
Good. Oh, I love those. Oh, me too on the calm, like the sense of just calm and peace and kind of being able to, I'm still working on creating a capacity within myself that regardless of what's swirling around me, I have that constant, and it's in a way better spot than it was 5 years ago, but it's a work in progress. So I'm that's encouraging to hear. Michele, I'd love this conversation. I knew I would. Thank you so much for being here today.
I love being here with you. It's great. You're a wonderful host. It's a lot of fun.
I know it is a lot of fun. I'm so glad we met. I'm so glad I reached out that day. Michelle's one of the first people I had the courage to reach out to and just ask to collaborate. We were still I was new and kind of getting comfortable. I'm like, I've got to do these reach outs. And I really feel a connection to her work. I'm so thankful that I did. You're such a blessing to me and in your work you do and just knowing you. Tell people where they can find you and follow you. And this will all be on our sources page at embracinglayers.com too, people. So if you're driving down the freeway, or taking your kids to soccer practice, you don't have to stop and screech and write this down. It'll be there, but let people know where they can find and follow you.
Well, the Asking for a Friend podcast, you can find that anywhere you download your podcast. So Spotify, Apple, it's on all of them. I'm on YouTube now, Asking for a Friend podcast. And then on Instagram, I'm Asking for a Friend _pod. And on Facebook, we're Asking for a Friend pod.
Awesome. There's so much good information on there. So many good resources, great conversations, a ton of content. So highly recommend. And like I said, you'll see me share Michelle's content when, especially when it ties in with things we're talking about, because it's just so useful. But I highly recommend it as something on your listening list. But thank you so much, my friend, for this conversation today. I so appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Melissa.
Ladies, just remember, it's never too late to start thinking about these things and empowering yourself and taking these steps to get comfortable in your own skin. And now's the time. Whatever age you're at, now's the time. And take that step forward. There's so much for you in every season. And so we hope you feel encouraged by that. Have a great week. And we'll see you next week on the Feel Podcast.